Have you ever stepped into a place that felt alive the moment you entered it? Not with people. With something else. Something older. Something watching. My name is Daniel. I never believed in ghosts or family curses. But that was before the house. Before the whispers. Before I found out what had been buried beneath our bloodline. When my grandfather died, he left me a house I'd never seen. A Victorian relic tucked away on the edge of Black Hollow, a forest village so small, it didn't even appear on modern maps. The letter was formal, simple, it's yours now. But be careful what you unlock. I thought it was a joke. Maybe a sentimental prank from a senile old man. But curiosity has its own hunger. I packed light and drove out the next weekend. I expected dust, decay, maybe a few mice. I didn't expect to lose myself inside that place. The house was tall and narrow, draped in ivy and shadow, its windows like empty eyes watching the road. The trees surrounding it pressed in close, like guards who had forgotten what they were protecting. The air was different here, still, cold, even under the sun. I turned the iron key in the door. It opened too easily. No creak, no hesitation. Just, welcome. Inside, the floorboards groaned under my boots, slow and low like something stirring in its sleep. Portraits lined the narrow hallway. Most of them faded, their faces blurred with time, except one. A man, middle-aged, with eyes just like mine. No plaque. No name. The air smelled like would rot and forgotten memories. I set my bag down in the main room and decided I wouldn't stay more than a night. But deep down, I already knew something had changed. Something had started. That night, I tried to sleep on the old couch. The wind whistled outside, brushing against the windows like fingertips. Somewhere deep inside the walls, pipes clanged like faraway footsteps. Normal house sounds, I told myself. Nothing to be afraid of. But around midnight, I heard it. A whisper. So faint I almost missed it. It came from beneath the floor. I held my breath, listening harder. Nothing. Then again, closer. A voice. Not quite words. More like breath, shaped like speech. It stopped as soon as I sat up. I stared at the floor beneath me. There was nothing there, but I didn't move for the rest of the night. The next morning, sunlight did nothing to warm the house. I found a trapdoor hidden beneath an old rug in the hallway, locked with a rusted iron latch. The wood around it was darker, softer, like it had been disturbed, or had never stopped moving. I felt something behind it. Not wind, not cold, a presence. I spent the day walking the house. There were rooms I didn't remember passing, doors that wouldn't open, and mirrors that reflected things I hadn't done. I told myself I was just tired, stress, grief, but every floorboard I stepped on felt like it was remembering me, judging me. That night, the whisper returned, clearer, and this time it said my name, Daniel. I didn't sleep the next night either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, a shadow standing at the foot of the couch, tall, unmoving, watching me. And when I'd open my eyes in panic, there'd be nothing there. But the whisper stayed, sometimes below me, sometimes behind the walls, and once inside my ear. By morning, I had decided to leave. This wasn't worth the inheritance. But when I tried to start the car, it coughed and died. The engine light blinked. My phone had no signal. The house had found a way to keep me here. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the trapdoor. It didn't just lead to a cellar. It led to something older, and it wanted to be opened. 8 Pointed Star Part 6. That afternoon, I climbed into the attic, looking for tools or anything useful. What I found instead was a trunk filled with old papers and leather-bound journals belonging to my grandfather. Inside were drawings of strange symbols, accounts of voices, descriptions of rituals performed by the men in our bloodline. my great-grandfather, his father. Each of them had lived in this house, and each had gone mad before the end. The final page in the most recent journal was a letter addressed to me. Daniel, if you're reading this, I failed to contain it. The house binds to us. It remembers our sins. You can't destroy it, but you can listen. And if you listen right, you can bargain. Grandfather. 8-Pointed Star, Part 7. That night, I unlocked the trapdoor. I didn't know what I expected. Demons. Bones. Fire. But all I found was a steep wooden staircase, disappearing into darkness. I went down slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. The air changed with each step. Heavier, colder, thick with something unseen. At the bottom was a low cellar, and in the far wall, brickwork. Fresh. Too fresh. I approached it, and the whisper came again, louder now. Painful in my ears. It wasn't just sound. It was pressure. Memory. It was inside me. I touched the bricks, and the voice screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. I pulled at the bricks, tearing them loose with bare hands, cutting my knuckles open. And behind them, I found a figure curled in the fetal position, mummified, skin like parchment, mouth wide open in silent scream. He was holding something, a diary, and a ring. When I touched the ring, visions filled my mind of a man in this house, whispering to the walls, performing dark rites, sealing his own brother alive for betrayal. The body was that brother, and his final memory was of screaming Daniel's name. My name. I read the diary that night. The man, David, had been my great-grandfather's younger brother. He had tried to expose the truth, tried to break the cycle. For that, he was murdered, hidden, and erased. But the house remembered him, and it had mistaken me for him. That's why it whispered my name, not calling me, warning me. Bard das ik or darwaza. With the truth uncovered, the house grew louder. Doors slammed on their own. Lights flickered even though the power was off. Shadows appeared in places they shouldn't, and the trapdoor wouldn't close anymore. I found another door the next day, hidden behind a bookshelf. Narrow, old, leading to a passage behind the walls. Inside it, names were carved into the wood. Names of every male from my family who had lived here, except mine. One section remained blank, waiting. I stared at the blank space on the wall, right beneath the other names. It wasn't just waiting for me. It was inviting me. Like this house had already decided I wouldn't leave. I reached out, hesitating, but the moment my fingers touched the wood, a shiver ran down my spine. Whispers flooded the passageway. They weren't distant anymore. They were around me, inside me. I heard cries, laughter, sobbing. Then a voice I recognized. My own grandfather, speaking in desperation. I gave them time. I gave them blood. But they always want more. Then silence. And then a choice. The voice inside me whispered again. Not a threat, not a warning. A deal. Stay, Daniel, and they won't follow your blood. That night, I had the nightmare again. Except now, it wasn't a dream. I was standing in the cellar, but the house was breathing. The walls pulsed like veins, and the shadows moved on their own, circling me, whispering names. David, Edward, John, Michael, and then Daniel, over and over, as if the house was rehearsing a hymn made from the names of the cursed. I ran, but every hallway led me back to the trapdoor. And there, standing at the bottom, was the figure of the man I had unsealed. David. He pointed to me and said, "One of us." I woke up gasping, my body drenched in cold sweat. I had to get out. I didn't care what was waiting outside or how broken the car was. I grabbed my bag, journal, the ring, and bolted out the front door. But the front yard wasn't the same. The trees had moved. The path to the road was gone. Fog rolled in thick and fast, and every direction I turned led me back to the house. The house didn't just remember. It hunted. Cornered, I returned to the attic and reopened the old trunk. Buried at the bottom was a tape recorder, dusty, broken, but intact enough to play. I hit play, and a voice filled the room. It was my grandfather's voice. If you hear this, it means they've chosen you. But you don't have to give them yourself. Give them the truth. Expose them. That's what David tried to do. That's why he died. I understood then. My silence was the price. But truth could be the offering. They didn't want my soul. They wanted acknowledgement. I took the diary and climbed down into the cellar one last time. The air was thicker than ever. Each breath I took felt like drinking water filled with smoke. I placed the diary where I had found David's body. I opened to the final page and read his words out loud. His pain, his betrayal, his murder. And when I reached the end, I said what none of them ever did. I believe you. And that's when the screaming stopped. The floor stopped shaking. The cold pulled away. I stayed in that cellar until the morning light began to seep through the cracks in the ceiling. When I climbed the stairs, the house felt empty. Not hollow, not haunted, just empty. I walked out into the yard, and this time the road was visible. The car started with a cough and a sputter, but it started. As I drove away, I looked into the rearview mirror. For the first time, the house didn't look threatening. It looked tired, and I think it was finally allowed to rest. I didn't return to the city right away. I stayed in the next town over, renting a cheap motel room and staring at the ceiling for hours. I should have felt relief, but I didn't, because the whispers hadn't followed me, but neither had the silence. It was like my mind had been rewired by the house. Every creak, every gust of wind, every faint sound behind the walls reminded me of them, of him, of the deal I didn't make, but still somehow completed. I needed answers, not from the past, from myself. In the weeks that followed, I traced every male relative I could find. Most were dead. Some had disappeared under strange circumstances. And then I found something I hadn't expected. A cousin, younger than me, just turned 15. He didn't know the family history. Didn't even know the Black Hollow house existed. But I realized something terrifying. If I had failed, they would have gone to him next. The whispers would have found their next Daniel. And if I stayed silent now, I wouldn't just be a survivor. I'd be the next Edward. I contacted a journalist, told him everything, showed the journals, the letters, the diary. I even took him to the house. It was still standing, but different now. Quiet, passive, like something that had gone into hibernation. He didn't believe most of it, but he believed the bones in the cellar, the sealed wall, the records of missing persons. The house was declared structurally unsafe and fenced off. But more importantly, its story was told. No more silence. No more secrets. No more whispers buried in the floorboards. A year later, on the anniversary of my grandfather's death, I returned one last time. The forest had overgrown the path. The air was different, lighter. I walked the perimeter of the property. I didn't go inside. I just stood there with a single candle in my hand and whispered into the wind. You were heard. You are not forgotten. Not by me. Not ever again. The wind didn't answer, but something deep in the ground shifted softly, like the earth finally settling after years of holding its breath. I turned and walked away. And this time, the road didn't disappear. Months had passed. I had tried to go back to life, real life. Noise, people work, supermarkets, small talk, background music. But everything felt pale. Like I was watching life from behind a window I couldn't break through. I wasn't haunted by ghosts anymore. I was haunted by silence. Not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes when you've been too close to truth, when you've heard the world speak in a language no one else believes in. It doesn't let you go. It makes everything else feel hollow. And even though the house was behind me, I realized something one morning while staring into the bathroom mirror. The whispers hadn't ended. They had simply moved. Inside me, I began writing. Not just memories, but everything. The rituals, the journal entries, the names, the things that were buried in my bloodline. The story needed to live outside me, or would eat me from within. So I built a manuscript, a mix of truth and warning. Not for fame, not for the world, for the next one, because there's always a next. Evil doesn't vanish. It sleeps. It adapts. It changes its voice, but it always waits for silence to return. So I filled every page with noise, with memory, with light. I gave the shadows nowhere to hide. One rainy night, I received a letter. No name, no return address, just a single page. We heard. We listened. We remember. Dite. It wasn't the same handwriting as the first one I received. This was new, a new voice in the dark, and it confirmed what I already knew. The house may rest, but the echoes will always find someone willing to listen. I sometimes dream of the house. It stands still in those dreams, never decayed, never aging. The windows always glow orange. The trees never sway, and the trapdoor is always open, like it's waiting for someone else. In one of those dreams, I'll walk through it again. But this time, it's filled with people. Men who look like me. They whisper my name, not in fear, but in unity, in sorrow, and in warning. And then I see him, David. He doesn't look angry anymore, just tired. Like a soldier who never made a home. He reaches toward me, not with blame, but with understanding. You listened, he says, and in that dream for the first time, I don't wake up afraid. Sometimes I walk the edge of forests, places where silence feels unnatural, and I wonder, how many more houses stand like that one? How many stories never got heard? How many people live with whispers under their floorboards and think they're just creaky wood? We dismiss what we fear. We ignore what we can't explain. And in doing so, we feed the very things that hunt in silence. The house didn't choose me because I was special. It chose me because I was next. And now that I've spoken, maybe, just maybe, I've broken the line. Or maybe I've just made the whisper smarter. And if one night you hear your name softly spoken from beneath your bed, don't answer. Don't whisper back. Because once you listen, you'll never hear silence the same way again.